Okay, I'm here to bring you this video of 30 book recommendations for those who are interested in analytic philosophy. So these are mostly introductory texts or foundational texts or readings and some anthologies that will cover that kind of stuff. All right, so let's just get into it. These are books that I have and that I've pretty much read through. Not cover to cover necessarily, but enough to recommend these to you. Okay, let's begin with Plato and Descartes. Plato's Five Dialogues, which contains Euthyphro, Apology, Credo, Meno, and Phaedo. It's a slim book. You can pick this up on eBay relatively cheaply. I think under like $10. For a lot of these books, I would highly recommend you check eBay or abebooks.com because the newer editions, some of these are like, yeah, a little, like more than a little pricey. I would not purchase them on brand new unless you have that kind of Skrilla. Then go ahead and yeah, splurge. Okay, for two and three, pick either one of these two. You don't need both of them. Descartes, Meditations on First Philosophy, translated and edited by John Cottingham. This is the Cambridge Texts in the History of Philosophy series. And then Cottingham is also involved in this other one, The Philosophical Writings of Descartes, Volume 2, not Volume 1, Volume 2. Um, this will cover the first meditation, second meditations, and so on. Uh, Translation Cottingham, Stuthoff, and Murdoch. I hope I have this guy's name right. I'm starting to doubt it, but okay, you'll find it, no problem. All right, next. I think a very important problem to try to understand, and it'll be helpful to you in developing your philosophical skills, I think. And it's just a perennial problem in philosophy, is the problem of universals, as it's commonly called. One book is called Universals, an opinionated introduction by D.M. Armstrong. Very good writer, very good philosopher, and a very good approach to the problem. In a more objective, I guess, approach. Sorry for the loud noises here. Universals and Particulars, um, Readings in Ontology by Michael Liu. Um, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his name, but I've never heard it. Anyway, so Liu does a lot of good work in metaphysics. I almost put his anthology in metaphysics on here, but yeah, I gotta curate some things. Okay, general introduction to philosophy texts, um, Knowledge, Reality, and Value, a mostly common sense guide to philosophy by Michael Huemer. This is pretty popular, and it's not bad for what it is. So it's kind of geared to the layman. So it's good. It's introductory stuff, obviously. Analysis and Metaphysics, an Introduction to Philosophy by P.F. Strawson, huge name in philosophy of language. Um, Slightly less for the layman, but I think if you're new to philosophy, you can still tackle this book. And Philosophy Made Simple by Popkin and Stroll, beautiful writers, good philosophers, but beautiful writers. Um, and even if you're like already an undergraduate somewhere, you will find that you're going to learn things from Popkin and Stroll, even on topics that you've already studied. So, Philosophy Made Simple, introductory text, those three. Analytic Philosophy. Um, yeah, exactly what counts as analytic philosophy and how far back we want to go back is contentious, but I have a couple of books here. 20th Century Analytic Philosophy by Abram Stroll. You see Stroll again because he's a great writer, good philosopher. Origins of Analytic Philosophy by Michael Dummett. Huge name, Michael Dummett. Okay, those two. Then, more specifically, analytic philosophy of language will be a part of analytic philosophy, but okay, so more specific here. Philosophy of language. The Frege reader, if you're gonna study analytic philosophy or philosophy of language, you got to do Frege, Russell, Wittgenstein. Um, but since this is mostly introductory texts, I've not really included Wittgenstein's stuff in here. So now I'm not saying read this whole thing. You're gonna want to read like the Begriffsschrift. You're gonna want to read Letters to Jordan. You're gonna want to read On Sinne Bedeutung. So there's selected texts here, but it's a good Beanie here. Michael Beanie is a good yeah, he's a good what's it called? I don't know what to call editor. Let's have Frege's work as just use the words I have here. Anyway, so Gottlob Frege, the Frege Reader. And Beanie has another good book, but it's not like so introductory. Readings in Semantics. Now, for these two, pick one of these two. You don't need both of 12 and 13. These are both anthologies of the most famous works in the philosophy of language, the most important works in the philosophy of language in the last, well, in the 20th century and into the, well, maybe not 21st century, but into in 20th century. So, but and again, you're gonna want to check eBay for the earlier editions. You're not missing out if you get the first edition or second edition. Like some of these books have like 13th editions, and like yeah, just get like the seventh or eighth edition, and you will be fine. Okay, uh, so readings in semantics by Sabih, Klemke, and Jacobson, editors. Philosophy of Language is a very popular book. A.P. Martinich. I have it. It's good, but I have an older edition. I think the new editions are now going for like $50. And yeah, that's a lot of money. Number 14, Truth and Meaning, An Introduction to the Philosophy of Language by Kenneth Taylor. Kenneth Taylor is a good philosopher. I think he has to be emeritus by now or emeritus, but he put out good books. Epistemology, Our Knowledge of the External World by Bertrand Russell, and I just highlighted the one essay on our knowledge of the external world. Very popular, one of his most popular essays. Epistemology, 50 Puzzles, Paradoxes, and Thought Experiments by Kevin McCain. These are the kind of thoughts and that generated, yeah, uh, that generated philosophical problems, not generated problems, but they are philosophical problems. And here, the ones that pertain to epistemology. A lot of them also pertain to like metaphysics, but yeah, this is a good way to start thinking about what is exactly the problem with uh, why we why is it difficult for us to say that we know things. Let's say, okay, understanding human knowledge. Barry Stroud. Barry Stroud is an older name now in philosophy. He's definitely he might not even be alive actually, but he was in his prime. Pretty much what Thomas Nagel was in his prime. And when I was studying, he was already pretty old, but he was a big name, and I like his writing, and I just think he's a good philosopher. But again, I'm not saying read the whole book, but there's definitely essays here that like are worth your time. Okay, symbolic logic. The first two are my recommendations for people who are getting into symbolic logic on their own, self learners, new to symbolic logic. Logic with Trees by David Howson. I think it's David Howson. I don't know why I didn't look this up, but I knew it was Howson. And then An Introduction to Propositional Logic and Set Theory by Cesar R. Gallo. Um, I'm not recommending the set theory side. I'm not saying anything against it. I just haven't read it. But the Introduction to Propositional Logic is good. Okay. An older book, An Introduction to Logic and Scientific Method by Morris R. Cohen and Ernest Nagel. This is a pretty old book, but I found good. There are good sections in here that are like well explained. Um, you you're not going to go wrong if you decide to take this on after an introductory text like one of these two above. Number 21, Logic and Philosophy, A Modern Introduction by Hausman, Kahane, and Tidman. This book, I think, is already on its like 13th edition. I have the 10th edition, and it's not the same. It's not the same authors. The 13th edition, I think Tidman is not part of the 13th edition. Um, but again, pricier if you get the latest edition. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm just saying you can get it much cheaper if you go down several editions. And I don't really think you're going to lose much of anything. Symbolic Logic by Daniel Kern. Uh, yeah, another solid symbolic logic book. There's tons. I thought about taking this off the list, but there's nothing wrong with it. But there's nothing like stellar about it either. So it'll do the job. Okay. Again, but not for self learners. These last three are not for self learners. First two, then once you get like once you learn some symbolic logic, you can start tackling the ones that aren't really they're introductory, but they're not as easy to digest as the first two. Logic is kind of like let me say so. Logic seems like abstruse and just difficult to understand. But once you get past the first initial hurdles, like the first, like a little bit of the terminology, a little bit of the machinery of symbolic logic, then you can start tackling other books relatively easily. But you got to get like somebody has to take those little baby steps with you, and these two books here are my recommendation for that. All right, critical thinking, more of informal logic, more of like a general logic uh, that like most people don't really ever study. Logical fallacies made easy. Improve critical thinking and learn to spot 30 communication tricks and common logic games. And the authors is the team at the Idea Library. That they are the authors, some anonymous authors, I guess. And this only covers 30 like communication tricks and fallacies, basically. Sorry, high pitched. Um, but it does a pretty good job of it. So it's a good way to start. There's a ton more. And another one, an A to Z of critical thinking, is by Beth Black. She covers some of the same material, but she does a little bit more as far as logic goes. Okay. There are other books you can get on informal fallacies, uh, which here they're calling just logical fallacies. But yeah, I kept this to a minimum here. I can recommend like 5 or 6 more books. Meta logic. This is not introductory stuff. Meta logic is not introductory stuff. And in group with meta logic, I put some other stuff which I thought was kind of like better in this group than any other group. So meta logic, an introduction to the meta theory of standard first order logic by Jeffrey Hunter. So if you're into meta logic, if you want to get into meta logic, this is a good way, I think, to start. Properties and Propositions, the Metaphysics of Higher Order Logic by Robert Truman. Good name for a logician. What if he was named Barry Truman? That would be even better. Anyway, so Properties and Propositions, kind of meta. Anyway, I didn't know where to put it exactly. Counterfactuals by David Lewis. More logic stuff. Good explanations of here. You'll get a good explanation of what's it called? Possible world semantics. A little bit, and then we have Turing's Vision, The Birth of Computer Science by Chris Bernhardt. This is not. I don't think Chris Bernhardt is a philosopher. But you don't need to be to understand. Um, what Turing was up to. Okay, Philosophy of Mind. I'm not a big Philosophy of Mind guy, but I am a big Jaguar Kim fan. His writing is just too good. It's just too good. And yeah, so if you want to learn about philosophy of mind, which is analytic philosophy, I recommend this Jaguar Kim book. It's an introductory text. I think it's part of the Rutledge series, but I don't hold me to that. Might not be. And Possible World Semantics, even though I talked about David Lewis and he gives you some, like this book here is just dedicated to Possible World Semantics. I think it's one of the best books, at least that I know of. It is the best book that I know of to learn like Possible World Semantics and yeah, the machinery and how it works. An Introduction and Its Philosophy by Bradley and Swartz. Okay, those are the 30 books I recommend if you are into analytic philosophy, getting into analytic philosophy, yeah, or just even if you're an undergraduate or even a graduate student, like some of these books are going to be very helpful. Okay, that's it. Um, Let me stop sharing. No, let me just stop the whole program. All right, I'm out. Later, guys.